Section 3. You will hear a student of landscape architecture discussing a project with his tutor. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
So, let's hear what you're doing for your next project.
I've decided to design a roof garden for a supermarket. I've been looking at some on the web, and I think that a garden on top of a building is the up-and-coming thing.
Okay. So you've done a bit of reading already?
Mm-hmm.
What benefits would there be for the client? Why do you think a supermarket chain would be willing to meet the expense of construction? You do realize that would be the first thing they raise.
Yes, I know. But I'd explain that in spite of the initially high expense, they would save that much in approximately 5 years. Well, I'd have to do sums. Calculate specifically.
Yes. How would the saving come about?
Mainly through lower heating and aircon bills. The extra insulation offered by having a layer of living plants in the soil would make a huge difference.
Okay. But they might feel the expense of maintenance would be an issue. After all, supermarkets don't normally employ gardeners.
What I thought was, if they made it a community garden rather than a simple low-maintenance green roof...
So there'd be public access?
Oh, yes. Then there'd be a sense of ownership in the local community, and people could take responsibility for it, instead of the supermarket paying a commercial company, and it'll really boost their public relations.
That's a good point. And have you been looking into how roof gardens are built nowadays?
I'm still exploring that. But if I take advantage of the latest technologies for roof gardens, it shouldn't be too difficult. But in any case, you have to use lightweight materials.
But that's a matter of making the right choices. You can even use quite traditional ones, such as wood, for the planting areas.
Yes, that's what I thought. It'll look good, and it isn't too heavy.
But for the basic construction, the issue you have to address first is the material used between the building and the garden.
You mean the barrier fabric, which ensures there's no chance of rainwater leaking down into the building?
Yes. Nowadays that is very good and quite easily sourced.
Then, on the other hand, there's the business of water within the roof garden itself.
You mean drainage? That's an important feature of the construction in any roof design.
Yes, but I think most drainage issues have been well understood for quite a long time.
Okay. But another thing is with plants in an exposed situation, you usually need to find ways to optimize rainfall.
Yes, because rainwater is best for the garden, if you can store it for when it's needed. What I've been looking at are some buildings which use fairly conventional storage tanks, the kind that have been in use for decades, but have them linked to modern automatic watering systems.
Sounds complicated.
It's less so in practice than it sounds, I think. I've been researching them, and actually the latest ones definitely work very well, and they can be electronically regulated to suit the local microclimate.
That sounds interesting. You seem to have been doing some thorough research. Make sure you reference all your sources when you write it up.
Yes, sure. There's one more aspect I'd just like to run past you if there's time. I want to include a light feature in the design.
Of course.
I've got a sketch here.
Let's have a look then.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Well, I was really impressed by something I saw on a roof in Cornwall, and I'd like to design something similar. You have an area of planting, and I'm thinking of installing this lighting in an area filled with low-growing evergreen shrubs.
You'd have to have lights and things well away from anywhere children might be. But I can see this could be very effective, if a bit complicated. How would it work? On this drawing, this is a section view. You have this low wall on the right.
Yes, that's it. This is just one element, and these areas would be repeated all round the planted area. I think this will probably be a wooden wall using reclaimed timbers with an angled ceramic top surface.
Perhaps even ridge tiles, like they use on roofs?
Ah, yes. That'd be just the sort of thing. And that'd make it weatherproof. And then the heavy-duty electric wiring comes up through the floor just outside the planted area and into the wall. Then it's brought through to a projector low in the side of the wall, and that sends a beam of light along the fibre optic cable.
So there's no electricity in the actual lights. The fibre optic goes across the surface of the soil in the planting area.
Yes, that's the beauty of it. The shrubs will soon grow to cover it up, of course. And then the cable goes past a wooden post, which is between the shrubs and can be a support for them as they grow bigger, and then runs up into each element of the installation.
So the light beam is carried up to the top of each element and illuminates a kind of conical glass cap? I see. Is that the bit which would glow in the dark?
Yes.
And what's the cap supported on? Is it a wall?
No, it's a slender acrylic rod, like the stem of a flower or mushroom, which the cable runs up inside of.
Well, I'll be interested to see the final drawings.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to putting it all together.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer describing some investigations into the sense of taste. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Pause the recording for 1 minute.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
This morning, I'm going to describe for you a few of the kinds of experiments that have been used to investigate the sense of taste, which is now recognised as being a far more complex and important area of neurological science than was previously believed by most people. The results of some of these experiments can be quite fun, and I shall suggest that you may want to choose one or two to try out in groups before having a go at designing a new experimental procedure of your own and trying to pinpoint the cause of your findings. The first one concerns a marketing exercise by a soft drinks company. The green colour of some cans was altered by the addition of yellow, so they were a brighter green. Then, test subjects were asked what they thought about the flavour of the drink in the new style cans, and they stated that there was more lime in the drink if it was in the ones with the new colour. Now, this was because the brain picks up cues from the way the product is presented, as well as the product itself, which trigger taste sensations. Before food was packaged, humans used colour to gauge the ripeness of fruit, for example. Next, there's the old problem with chewing gum. Everyone knows that after a few minutes chewing, it loses its minty flavour. However, if you ask people to chew up to the point where it becomes tasteless, and then ask them to eat a little sugar and continue chewing, to most people's surprise, what happens is that the original mintiness actually returns, because it is the sweetness which is needed to make the mintiness perceptible. So, combinations of flavours can be significant, as the brain needs one of them in order to recognise the other. Another experiment demonstrates something we've all done. Drink half a fizzy drink straight from the fridge and then leave it at room temperature for a while. Take a sip and you may well decide you don't like it. The warm drink is too sweet to be refreshing. So, put the rest back in the fridge until it's chilled again. Now try it. Much better. Of course, the sweetness doesn't change. It is our perception, because how sweet it tastes depends on the temperature. The extent to which the drink is sweetened is less evident if the drink has been cooled. Another interesting result has been derived from experiments with sound. One of these involved eating crisps. Subjects were put into soundproof rooms and given batches of crisps to eat. As they ate, the sound of crunching which they made as they ate the crisps was played back to them. This was adjusted so that they sometimes heard the crunching as louder, or at other times more high-frequency sounds were audible in the sound feedback that accompanied their eating. Fascinatingly, if the sound level was louder or higher frequency, they reported that the crisps were actually fresher. Of course, the crisps were in fact the same every time. So, it was clear that the level and quality of what they were hearing was influencing their taste perceptions. So, we've looked briefly at colour, at complementary flavours, at temperature and sound. It seems that all the senses are working together here. But what about the sense of touch? A number of experiments have been done in this area. If you take, for instance, cheese sauce and prepare different versions, some thicker and some thinner, but without any alteration in the strength of flavour, what do you think the subjects perceive? Yep, if the sauce is thicker, they'll say the cheesy flavour is less strong. It was clear that the thing that was influencing the subject's judgment about the flavour of the sauces was the texture of each one. Now, this result is important for dietitians as well as marketing executives. Lastly, another variation on the two flavours theme. This concerns the capacity of the brain for bridging a sensory gap. The subjects in this experiment stuck out their tongues so that the testers could drip two liquids onto them simultaneously, one strawberry flavoured and one sugar flavoured. The testers then took away each flavour in turn. When the sweetness was taken away, the subjects reported they could hardly taste anything. But they continued to think they could taste strawberry even after it was taken away. So that taste gap was filled. Well, that's just a quick look at some of the examples in the current literature. The references will be in the handouts you'll get at the end of the session. Now, let's see about trying a few of them for ourselves.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.
Section 3. You will hear two anthropology students called Victor and Olivia discussing their joint presentation about a Norwegian explorer called Thor Heyerdahl. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Right, well, for our presentation, shall I start with the early life of Thor Heyerdahl?
Sure. Why don't you begin with describing the type of boy he was, especially his passion for collecting things?
That's right. He had his own little museum. And I think it's unusual for children to develop their own values and not join in their parents' hobbies. I'm thinking of how Heyerdahl wouldn't go hunting with his dad, for example.
Yeah, he preferred to learn about nature by listening to his mother read to him. And quite early on, he knew he wanted to become an explorer when he grew up. That came from his camping trips he went on in Norway, I think.
No, it was climbing that he spent his time on as a young man.
Oh, right. After university, he married a classmate, and together they decided to experience living on a small island to find out how harsh weather conditions shaped people's lifestyles.
As part of their preparation, before they left home, they learnt basic survival skills, like building a shelter. I guess they needed that knowledge in order to live wild in a remote location with few inhabitants, cut off by the sea, which is what they were aiming to do.
An important part of your talk should be the radical theory Heyerdahl formed from examining mysterious ancient carvings that he happened to find on the island. I think you should finish with that.
Okay.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
All right, Victor, so after your part, I'll talk about Thor Heyerdahl's adult life, continuing from the theory he had about Polynesian migration. Up until that time, of course, academics had believed that humans first migrated to the islands in Polynesia from Asia in the west.
Yes, they thought that travel from the east was impossible because of the huge empty stretch of ocean that lies between the islands and the nearest inhabited land.
Yes, but Heyerdahl spent ages studying the cloud movements, ocean currents, and wind patterns to find if it was actually possible. And another argument was that there was no tradition of large shipbuilding in the communities lying to the east of Polynesia. But Heyerdahl knew they made lots of coastal voyages in locally built canoes.
Yes, or sailing on rafts, as was shown by the long voyage that Heyerdahl did next. It was an incredibly risky journey to undertake. Sometimes I wonder if he did that trip for private reasons, you know, to show others that he could have spectacular adventures. What do you think, Olivia?
Well, I think it was more a matter of simply trying out his idea, to see if migration from the east was possible.
Yes, that's probably it. And the poor guy suffered a bit at that time because the war forced him to stop his work for some years.
Yes. When he got started again and planned his epic voyage, do you think it was important to him that he achieve it before anyone else did?
I haven't read anywhere that that was his motivation. The most important factor seems to have been that he used only ancient techniques and local materials to build his raft.
Yes. I wonder how fast it went.
Well, it took them 97 days from South America to the Pacific Islands.
And after that, Heyerdahl went to Easter Island, didn't he? We should mention the purpose of that trip. I think he sailed there in a boat made out of reeds.
No, that was later on in Egypt, Olivia.
Oh, yes, that's right.
But what he wanted to do was talk to the local people about their old stone carvings and then make one himself to learn more about the process.
I see. Well, what a great life. Even though many of his theories have been disproven, he certainly left a lasting impression on many disciplines, didn't he? To my mind, he was the first person to establish what modern academics call practical archaeology. I mean that they try to recreate something from the past today, like he did with his raft trip. It's unfortunate that his ideas about where Polynesians originated from have been completely discredited.
Yes. Right, well, I'll prepare a PowerPoint slide at the end that acknowledges our sources. I mainly used The Life and Work of Tor Heyerdahl by William Oliver. I thought the research methods he used were very sound, although I must say I found the overall tone somewhat old-fashioned. I think they need to do a new, revised edition.
Yeah, I agree. What about the subject matter? I found it really challenging.
Well, it's a complex issue.
I thought the book had lots of good points. What did you think of the illustration?
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
I'm